Hello, my dear friends, and welcome back to our channel. Have you ever felt like you were standing on the edge of a great change? A moment so profound, so heavy with consequence, that your entire world depended on the very next step you took? The story I'm about to share with you today is about that exact moment. But this is no simple fairy tale of kings and castles. This is a story of a forgotten promise, of a people adrift among the stars, and of a war that was never meant to be a conquest, but a rescue mission in disguise. We are going to follow a young man who must carry the legacy of a legend, battling enemies without and the demons within his own soul. We will witness miracles that defy the laws of physics, tragedies that will break your heart, and a final staggering twist that will redefine everything you think you know about heroes and monsters. It will force you to ask the question, is the truth ever really what it seems? Before we begin this journey, I want to feel our connection right here, right now. Whoever you are, wherever you are, pause for just a moment and comment below. Let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. From New York to New Delhi, London to Los Angeles, or Sydney to Seoul. I want to see just how far our community of story lovers stretches across the globe. All right, take a deep breath. Our story begins now. The silence in the cosmos is absolute, but aboard the Voyager fleet, it was a living thing. It was a silence filled with the low, steady hum of life support, a mechanical symphony that had been the lullaby for generations born in the void. But tonight, this silence was different. It was heavy, hollow. Elara, their beacon, the legendary captain who had guided them across 40 light-years of exile, was gone. She had rejoined the stardust from which they all came. Her legacy was a vacuum, and the man chosen to fill it, Kaelen, felt smaller than the most distant star. He stood on the command bridge of the flagship, the Promise, staring through the transparent plasteel viewport at a faint azure dot suspended in the velvet blackness. The Homeworld, the cradle of their civilization, abandoned after a cataclysmic energy event centuries ago. It was there, tangible, a promise made manifest, but it was also a terror. The planet was no longer an empty home waiting for their return. It was occupied, inhabited by feral, mutated creatures and hostile territorial factions that had evolved in the planet's harsh, energy-soaked environment. They were known collectively and fearfully as the Echoes. Elara's shadow was so vast it eclipsed the constellations. She had been a prophet, an icon, a force of nature, and Kaelen, he was just a soldier, a brilliant tactical commander, yes, but the voice in his own head, a cold and persistent whisper, told him he was an imposter, a man chosen not for his merit, but because he was the last one standing at Elara's side. Just then, a gentle current of cerulean light flowed into his consciousness. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, a stream of cool, crisp data that carried an inexplicable warmth. It was the source, the ancient cosmic intelligence, perhaps the consciousness of the universe itself, that had guided their people on their long sojourn. Kaelen, the source communicated, a thought that felt both alien and intimate. As I was with Elara, so I will be with you. Fear is the thief of destiny. Be brave. The message didn't quell the tremor in his hands, but it gave him an anchor in the swirling sea of his own doubt. He had to act. The next day, in the stark metallic confines of the council chamber, the schism he feared became reality. Valerius, a veteran commander whose face was a road map of 100 forgotten battles, rose to his feet. His voice was sharp, like fractured metal. Elara brought us to the doorstep, but she is gone. We cannot wait for whispers from an old machine. The Echoes are down there. We need a preemptive strike, a swift, decisive blow against their primary fortress, Ethelberg, before they can mount a defense. The officers loyal to Valerius nodded in grim agreement. His logic was cold, hard, and compelling. It was the logic of war. Kaelen took a deep, steadying breath. "No," he said, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "Your logic is based on what we can see, Valerius. Ilara taught us to trust what we cannot. We will not strike blind. We will send a reconnaissance team first." Valerius's eyes flashed with open contempt. "Recon? On a fortress shielded by a lethal energy firewall? That's not a plan, it's a suicide note." "It is an order," Kaelen replied, forcing a steel into his voice that he did not feel. He could feel the weight of their doubt, a physical pressure on his shoulders. His first battle was not to be against the echoes, but for the soul of his own command. He knew that every decision from this moment on would determine whether he became a true leader or merely a sad footnote in the grand, sweeping saga of Ilara. The first mission had been given, a mission not just to scout the enemy, but to discover the man he was meant to be. Kaelen's best scouts, Rorik and Elia, moved like specters through the rusted, decaying alleyways of Ethelberg's lower levels. The city was a brutalist maze of scraped metal towers reaching up like broken fingers, all of it contained within the shimmering amber-hued energy curtain that sang a low, deadly tune. They navigated the labyrinth to a scrap and salvage workshop, the air thick with the tang of superheated metal and ozone. It was there they found Lyra. She was unlike anyone they had ever encountered in the sterile, ordered world of the fleet. Her hair was a short shock of charcoal black, her eyes so sharp they seemed to bore right through their combat armor, and a permanent, cynical smirk played on her lips. Her heart, it seemed, was forged from the very scrap she traded. "Voyagers," she drawled, her gaze flicking between them and the high-grade tech credit Rorik had placed on her workbench. "You've got nerve. What do you want?" "Information," Elia said, her voice low. "Defensive schematics, patrol schedules, weaknesses." Lyra let out a short, humorless laugh. "Information in Ethelberg costs more than clean water, but," she gestured to the credit, "this is a compelling down payment. I'll listen." She agreed to help, but her motives were clear. This was a transaction, nothing more. She guided them through forgotten maintenance tunnels and echoing ventilation shafts, her movements fluid and certain in the urban decay. While they lay low, waiting for a patrol to pass, she overheard their quiet conversation. They didn't speak of conquest or plunder. They spoke of the source, of a verdant home, of a future where children wouldn't have to be born on cold, sterile starships. They spoke of hope. It was a word Lyra had forcefully excised from her vocabulary long ago. Hope was a luxury, a dangerous indulgence for those who lived in the dregs of Ethelberg. Yet, as she listened to the earnest conviction in their voices, something deep inside her, a seed-long thought dead and buried under layers of cynicism, began to stir. When the city's guards, the hulking forms of the echoes, stormed the sector unexpectedly, Lyra acted on an impulse she didn't understand. She didn't just point to an escape route. She created a diversion, a carefully timed plasma overload in a nearby conduit that sent the patrol scrambling. She risked her own life to buy them precious seconds. Before they slipped away into the darkness, she grabbed Aaliyah's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Wait," she whispered, her voice urgent, the smirk gone. "There's something else you need to know. The ones in charge here, the alphas, they're not just afraid of you. They're terrified of something that's already inside this city, something older than these walls." Her words hung in the air between them, a cryptic and heavy puzzle piece. It wasn't just intelligence, it was a premonition, a variable that didn't fit into any equation Kaelen had conceived. Rorik and Elia made it back to the fleet, carrying not just defense schematics, but a profound mystery and the story of the woman who had saved them. Kaelen listened, his brow furrowed in concentration. For the first time, he felt a sliver of light pierce the oppressive cloud of his self-doubt. Perhaps the source didn't guide them with cold logic alone, but through unexpected connections, through hearts that seemed hardened beyond repair, but still yearned for a glimmer of hope. The enigma of Ethelberg had deepened, and Kaelen knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that the key to victory lay not in superior tactics, but somewhere deeper, hidden within the very heart of the battle to come. To reach Ethelberg, the entire Voyager fleet had to cross the rift. It was not a river of water, but a cosmic torrent, a flowing maelstrom of raw plasma and chaotic electromagnetic storms that raged between two massive asteroids, forming a natural, violent border between the safe void and their destination system. To attempt a crossing was to sail into a hurricane of cosmic fire. Valeria stood beside Kaelen on the bridge, his arms crossed, a grimly satisfied look on his face. "Behold, Kaelen," he said, his voice laced with a bitter, "I told you so" tone. "This is the wall of reality. No amount of faith can breach that. We'll lose half the fleet to that cauldron of raw plasma. We must find another way, even if it takes another generation." Kaelen didn't respond. He just stared at the churning, lethal current. In his mind, the directive from the source was simple, yet utterly insane. Let the Heartstone lead the way. The Heartstone, a crystalline artifact that levitated in the core chamber of the Promise, was their most sacred relic. It was a quantum energy core of ancient design, rumored to be a fragment from the very event that birthed their universe. It was their direct conduit to the source. "Summon the Heartstone engineers," Kaelen commanded, his voice betraying no hesitation. "Prepare to deploy the Heartstone on a forward drone." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Even Kaelen's most loyal officers paled. Deploy their most precious artifact, their spiritual center, directly into a cosmic tempest? Valerius let out a short, dry, hopeless laugh. He's lost his mind. Alara chose a madman. But the order was given. A small, unmanned drone carrying the Heartstone within a protective field was launched from the forward bay. It shot towards the rift. Every soul on the bridge held their breath. On the main view screen, they watched the drone begin to shudder violently as it approached the edge of the storm. Energy readings spiked into the red. "Hull integrity is failing. It's going to be torn apart," a young ensign cried out. Kaelen closed his eyes. "Trust," he whispered, a prayer more for himself than for anyone else. And then the impossible happened. As the Heartstone entered the very heart of the rift, it began to glow with a soft, placid sapphire light. The light wasn't brilliant or aggressive. It was deep and calming, like the tranquil depths of a silent ocean. From the Heartstone, waves of stabilizing energy pulsed outwards. The chaotic plasma, the furious electromagnetic vortices, began to slow. The maelstrom was being tamed. The lethal currents bent, parted, and receded, forming a serene corridor, a path of tranquil starlight stretching through the heart of the storm. On the bridge, no one spoke. The choked gasps of disbelief slowly erupted into a single unified roar of celebration. Engineers hugged each other. Grizzled soldiers, veterans of 100 skirmishes in the void, had tears streaming down their faces. Valerius stood frozen, his jaw slack, the cynical certainty on his face melting away into pure, unadulterated awe. "Forward," Kaelen ordered, his voice now as solid as the plasteel beneath his feet. The Voyager fleet, ship by single ship, entered the corridor of light. They sailed through a space that moments before had meant certain death, now as peaceful as a starlit river. As they passed, Kaelen saw the look in his people's eyes as they turned to him. For the first time, they didn't see a substitute. They saw a leader, a conduit for the source. He had passed his first true test, not with a sword or a stratagem, but with an act of what had seemed like sheer, unadulterated madness. but he knew with a sobering clarity that the real test still lay ahead, waiting for him on the other side of that impossible river. The strategy, the source delivered for the takedown of Ethelberg, was an affront to every military doctrine Kaelen had ever studied. There would be no orbital bombardment, no elite strike teams, only a bizarre, protracted ritual, a symphony of silence. For 6 days, the source instructed, you will lead the entire army to march around Ethelberg's Firewall, 1 circuit each day, in absolute silence, not the clash of a weapon, not a whispered word, only the sound of your unified footsteps and the call of the ceremonial horns, crafted from the antlers of the ancient star beasts. On the 7th day, you will march 7 times. And as the 7th circuit is completed, the Heartstone engineers will use the core to project a resonant frequency. At that moment, you will all unleash a single, great shout. When Kaelen presented this plan to the council, the disbelief morphed into open ridicule. A parade? Valerius thundered, his face flushing with rage. We are an army, not a theatrical troupe. You want us to make ourselves a moving target for a week? This is madness. It is a suicide ritual. Half the council sided with him. The threat of mutiny was a palpable static in the air. That night, Kaelen did not sleep. He walked through the encampment from fire to fire, looking his soldiers in the eye. He didn't argue with logic. He told them the story of crossing the rift. He spoke of hope, of the promise of a home. He didn't command them to believe in him. He invited them to believe in something bigger. The first day was an exercise in pure tension. Tens of thousands of voyagers marched from their landing zone toward the amber firewall of Ethelberg. They moved in a heavy, unnatural quiet. From the battlements, the echoes looked down, their guttural jeers echoing across the plain. They fired warning shots, blasts of energy that sizzled in the air, but the voyagers simply continued their slow, deliberate march, completed their circuit, and withdrew in silence. The second day and the third, the ritual was repeated. The taunts from the echoes began to dwindle, replaced by a nervous confusion. The silence of the voyagers was more unnerving than any battle cry. It was pregnant with judgment, with a power they could not comprehend. Within the Voyager ranks, doubt was slowly being forged into a focused discipline. They began to feel a rhythm, a strength in the synchronicity of 1,000 silent footsteps. By the dawn of the 7th day, an almost sacred anticipation had settled over the camp. They began their final march. 1 lap, 2, 7, the tension was stretched to its breaking point. On the walls, the echoes had fallen silent, their fear a palpable thing, watching, waiting for the inevitable hammer to fall. As the 7th lap concluded, Kaelen raised his hand. The Heartstone engineers placed their hands on the core. A pure, clean frequency, almost too high to be heard by the human ear, pulsed outwards. It was not a weapon, it was a note, a perfect resonant note. And the firewall, the impenetrable defense of Ethelberg, began to vibrate. The note resonated with its very energy matrix. Ripples appeared on its amber surface, then fractures of light. And then, with a deafening shriek of tearing energy, the shield shattered like glass. The shockwave buckled the ground. The physical walls behind it cracked and crumbled. Now, Kaelen roared. Tens of thousands of voices, pent up for 7 days, erupted in a single unified shout. It was a sonic tsunami of faith, of release, of victory. It washed over the city as the Voyagers poured through the breaches, meeting not an organized army, but a panicked, psychologically broken enemy. In the midst of the assault, Kaelen found Lyra. She and her people were huddled in an alcove, terrified but unharmed. He kept his promise. The victory at Ethelberg was not just a military one. It was a miracle, a confirmation that their path was being guided not by human logic, but by a grander cosmic symphony. Valerius stood amidst the rubble, his energy rifle lowered, silent, For the first time, he had nothing to say. The resounding victory at Ethelberg changed everything. Faith in Kaelen and the Source surged to an all-time high, but success, like the vacuum of space, can be a dangerously empty place. Confidence quickly curdled into arrogance. "We have the momentum," Valerius declared in a council meeting, his voice no longer scornful, but filled with a rapacious enthusiasm. "The next city, Oakhaven, sits in a strategic valley. We don't need to wait for another one of the Source's cryptic pageants. Let's use our own strength, our proven power, to crush them." His words were seductive. The soldiers, flushed with their seemingly easy victory, were eager to prove their own mettle. Even Kaelen, for a fleeting moment, felt the pull of pride. He had proven himself. Perhaps Valerius was right. Perhaps it was time they acted on their own. Pressured by the council and blinded by a sliver of his own hubris, Kaelen made the most catastrophic decision of his life. He agreed. He ordered the assault on Oakhaven based purely on military strategy. He did not consult the Source. The attack on Oakhaven seemed to go well at first. They advanced into the valley with ease. It was too easy. As they reached the valley floor, the ground beneath them erupted. From hidden bunkers and camouflaged positions on the surrounding cliffs, thousands of echoes, completely missed by their long-range scans, rose up. It was an ambush, a perfectly executed trap. The valley floor became a kill box. The Voyagers were pinned down, outflanked and savaged from all sides. Kaelen, watching from his command post on a ridge, could only look on in horror as his forces were cut to pieces. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. He tried to order a retreat, a desperate, choked command, but it was too late. The screams of his friends, of the soldiers who had trusted him, echoed over the comms before being replaced by the sickening finality of static. When the bloodied survivors finally limped back to camp, the casualty report was delivered. 36 elite soldiers were gone, 36 of his best, 36 lights of hope extinguished. That night, Kaelen didn't go to the command bridge. He walked alone to the Heartstone chamber. He stood before the gently pulsing crystal. The same light that had symbolized victory just days before now seemed to mock him with its serene glow. His composure shattered. He fell to his knees. Hot, shameful tears streamed down his face. He slammed his fist against the cold metal deck again and again, ignoring the pain as his knuckles split open. "Why?" he screamed, his voice raw and broken in the vast, empty chamber. "Why would you do this? We trusted you. We won. Why would you abandon us now?" He bowed his head, his body racked with sobs. He was no longer a commander, no longer a successor. He was just a young man who had led his friends to their deaths. He had hit the deepest, darkest bottom of despair, a place where faith was just a distant memory, and all that remained was the cold, heavy weight of a fatal mistake. And in the silence that followed his scream, he felt a void more terrifying than any defeat. It was the silence of the Source. In the crushing silence of the Heartstone chamber, Kaelen waited for a reprimand, for a divine rebuke, but the Source met his anguish with only more silence. And that silence was a judgment more profound than any words. It wasn't until the first rays of a new day's light filtered through the viewport that a new stream of consciousness flowed into his mind. It wasn't anger. It was a deep, resonant sorrow. "I did not abandon you, Kaelen. You abandoned me. There is a rot in the camp, a tear in the covenant. Purge the camp, and you will find your answer." The purge began. It was not a witch hunt, but a somber and painful ritual. Kaelen stood before his people, his face gaunt, but his eyes now filled with a renewed, terrible resolve. He did not hide his mistake. He confessed his arrogance and called upon them to seek the truth together. Unit by unit, family by family, they were brought before the Heartstone. The tension in the assembly hall was a physical thing. The circle of selection narrowed slowly, inexorably, from the fleet to a wing to a squad. Finally, the Heartstone's light, which had remained a neutral blue, pulsed with a sorrowful crimson glow as it passed over a single soldier. Jax, one of their finest warriors, a hero of Ethelberg. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Jax, his face a mask of stoic duty, his eyes always loyal. It was impossible. Kaelen approached him, his voice hoarse. "Jax, is it true?" Jax did not deny it. He raised his head, and for the first time Kaelen saw the profound brokenness behind his disciplined facade. He simply nodded. "Show us," Kaelen said softly. Jax led them to his private quarters. From a hidden compartment beneath the floor plating, he pulled out a cloth-wrapped object. As he unwrapped it, a shimmering, complex piece of technology was revealed. It was a holographic projector, an exquisite artifact from Ethelberg, an item from the spoils that were to be consecrated entirely to the source. "Why?" Valerius roared, his voice cracking with disbelief. "For greed?" "No," Jax said, his own voice breaking. He looked at Kaelen, and his confession was not an excuse, but a cry from a shattered soul. "The source, Elara. They always spoke of promises, of the future, but my future is dead. My wife, my little girl, they died in a plasma leak 20 years ago during the long drift. The source took my family from me. I wanted something back for myself, something I could hold, something that was real." The assembly hall fell silent. This was not the story of a greedy traitor. This was the tragedy of a man who had lost everything, including his faith. The punishment, according to the covenant, was unavoidable, but the way it was carried out changed everything. It was not an execution. It was a farewell. Kaelen stood by Jax's side as he returned the artifact to the Heartstone. He placed a hand on the soldier's shoulder. "Your loss is our loss," Kaelen said, his voice thick with an empathy born of his own recent failure. "Today we don't just purge a sin, we mourn with you." When the sentence was carried out, it was done in silence and with a profound dignity. Jax accepted it as a final release, and in that moment Kaelen learned the deepest lesson of leadership. The covenant wasn't just a set of rules, it was a living connection, and when one thread breaks, the entire fabric feels the strain. He learned that the price of leadership was not only justice, but compassion. The wound of Oakhaven was still there, but it had been cleansed by a purifying sorrow, and the path forward, though difficult, was finally clear again. With the sin of Jax purged from the camp, the bond between the Voyagers and the Source was restored. This time, as Kaelen prepared to assault Oakhaven a second time, he did so with a humility born of failure. The plan the Source provided was not a miracle, but a stroke of brilliant military strategy using the very terrain that had been their tomb as their weapon. A small force would lure the enemy into the valley, while the main army, led by Kaelen and a now cooperative Valerius, would ambush them from hidden caves high on the cliffs. The battle unfolded like clockwork. The Voyagers fought with a renewed discipline and a somber courage. They were victorious, a hard-won victory that felt earned, not given. In the ensuing pursuit, they captured a high-ranking Echo commander. He was immense, his body a twisted landscape of bone spurs and gray, leathery skin, his eyes burning with a fanatic's hatred. By all rights, he should have been executed on the spot. But Kaelen, haunted by the tragedy of Jax, felt a different impulse. He gave an order that stunned his men. "Bring him to the Heartstone." Valerius protested immediately. "Kaelen, that's a risk we can't afford. It's a monster." "We made the mistake of thinking we knew everything once before," Kaelen replied, his gaze unwavering. "This time, we let the Source be the judge." The captured commander was bound and dragged into the Heartstone chamber. He snarled and spat as he was forced before the crystal, straining against his bonds. The crew braced for a blast of retributive energy. But the Heartstone did not attack. Instead, it began to glow with an emerald green light, a warm and gentle energy that enveloped the captive. The snarling stopped. The hatred in his eyes began to fade, replaced by confusion, then astonishment. And then the true miracle began. The jagged bone protrusions on his skin softened, receding back into his body. His coarse gray flesh smoothed, taking on a human hue. His stooped, twisted frame began to straighten. Before the astounded eyes of everyone present, his monstrous form melted away, revealing a man, a human face, etched with suffering, but unmistakably human. He looked down at his own hands, at fingers that were no longer talons. He began to weep, not the guttural sobs of a beast, but the heartbroken cries of a long-term prisoner. He looked up at Kaelen, and his lips formed words in a long-dead dialect of the Voyager's ancestral tongue, a language only their historical archives recognized. "Thank you," he stammered. "You have returned." Kaelen stepped forward, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Who are you?" The man, no longer an echo, looked at him with tear-filled eyes. He then revealed a truth so staggering, so world-altering, it would redefine their entire existence. "We are not creatures of this world. We are the ones who were left behind. When the cataclysm came, when your ancestors fled, ours couldn't make it to the arcs. The energy of this world, it twisted us, warped us. It erased our memories, leaving only rage and pain. We are not your enemies." He took a shuddering breath, his voice cracking with the weight of centuries. "We are your kin. We are your brothers." A deafening silence filled the chamber. Kaelen, Valerius, every soldier and technician present stood frozen in shock. The war they had been fighting, the lives they had taken, it was all built on a tragic, cosmic misunderstanding. Their mission was not conquest. It never was. Their mission was reunion. Their mission was to heal. They had returned not to reclaim a planet, but to rescue a lost family. This twist didn't just change the strategy, it changed the very soul of their journey. The revelation sent a shockwave through the fleet. The joy of finding their lost kin was tempered by the profound grief for all that had been done, but there was no time for reflection. News of Oakhaven's fall and the disappearance of a high-ranking commander reached the other Echo factions. Led by a fanatical warlord named Malachor who knew nothing of the truth, a massive coalition was formed, an army larger than anything the Voyagers had ever faced. Their goal was simple and absolute: annihilate the invaders they believed had come to exterminate them. Kaelen faced an impossible choice. To fight meant to knowingly kill the very brothers he had just found. To stand down meant the annihilation of his own people. "What do we do now, Kaelen?" Valerius asked, all his old military certainty gone, replaced by a heavy weariness. "We can't fight them." "We must," Kaelen replied, his gaze like flint. "But we will not fight to destroy. We will fight to subdue, to capture, to heal. Every life we save today is a victory." A new battle plan was forged. Weapons were recalibrated to deliver stunning, non-lethal charges. Medical teams were placed on high alert, equipped with new healing energy emitters reverse-engineered from the Heartstone's frequency. The greatest battle of their history erupted in the Valley of Reunion, a tidal wave of hundreds of thousands of echoes, fueled by generations of rage, crashed against the Voyager lines. Kaelen's forces fought defensively, a dance of violence and mercy trying to disable their foes with minimal harm. It was a battle where the objective wasn't to win the field, but to win the heart of the enemy. But Malachor's numbers were overwhelming. As dusk began to fall, the Voyager lines started to buckle. Darkness would hide the enemy's movements and make their mission of mercy impossible. In the swirling chaos, Kaelen looked up at the darkening sky, where the planet's twin moons were beginning to appear. He closed his eyes, reaching out to the source. He didn't pray for victory. He prayed for a chance. "Source," he sent, a desperate, silent plea. "Grant us more time. Grant us more light. In answer, the primary heartstone aboard, the Promise in orbit, began to thrum. It gathered an immense charge of energy. Then a beam of pure, brilliant light shot down from the heavens, striking the secondary heartstone at the center of Kaelen's formation on the ground. The terrestrial crystal amplified the beam, exploding in a halo of light that banished the twilight, bathing the entire valley in the warm, bright glow of a second dawn. The shadows vanished. But the light did more. It carried the pure, healing frequency of the source. The echoes caught in its glow were not burned. Instead, the warped, aggressive energy that fueled their rage began to dissipate. The feral madness in their eyes softened into exhaustion and confusion. Seizing the divine opportunity, Kaelen's troops surged forward, not with blades, but with capture nets and stun charges. The battle was over in minutes. Malachor, weakened and stunned by a power he could not comprehend, was captured alive. That night, no sun set. A pillar of celestial light stood sentinel over the valley, a beacon of hope. It bore witness to a battle unlike any other, a battle where compassion had been the ultimate weapon, and victory was measured not in the number of the slain, but in the number of the saved. The sun and moon had witnessed the birth of a new era, one illuminated by truth and grace. The war was over, but the most arduous work was just beginning. The Valley of Reunion was transformed from a battlefield into the largest field hospital in the known universe. Under the constant, gentle glow of the Heartstone's light, Voyager medical teams worked tirelessly, using the healing energy to purge the generational warp from thousands of captured echoes. One by one, they were freed from their physical and spiritual torment, awakening to a new world, looking into the faces of brothers and sisters they never knew they had. The process was fraught with difficulty. There was fear, disbelief, and the agony of fragmented memories returning. Kaelen, Lyra, and Valerius moved among the recovering people, not as conquerors, but as counselors. Kaelen told them stories of the long journey through the stars. Lyra, with the empathy of one who had known life at the bottom, helped them reconnect with their own humanity. And Valerius, the hardened general, proved to be the most patient of all, using his strength to protect the weak and organize the monumental task of rebuilding. The division of the land took on a meaning they had never imagined. The old star charts were unfurled, but this time the leaders of the Voyagers sat beside the newly emerged representatives of the healed tribes. They did not draw borders. They drew blueprints for collaboration. This region would be dedicated to agriculture, that one to technological recycling, another to restoring the planet's wounded biosphere. It was a plan for a shared home, a new tapestry woven from threads long thought severed. At a formal ceremony on a hill overlooking the burgeoning new city, Kaelen stood before everyone, Voyager and healed alike. "Our journey," he began, his voice carrying in the respectful silence, "did not begin when we arrived in this system. It began long ago with a promise. We thought that promise was for a piece of land. We were wrong. The promise was for a family. Our journey was never about reclaiming a planet. It was about reclaiming each other. The source did not lead us home. It led us to one another." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the hopeful faces before him. "The past holds more pain than we can measure, but today, we are not defined by what was lost. We are defined by what we choose to build together." The final scene of their epic was not an ending, but a beginning. Kaelen, Lyra, Valerius, and the leaders of the former Echo tribes stood side by side, together placing the first foundation stone of a new, unified capital. The stone was a composite forged from the recycled metal of their warships and the native rock of the Homeworld. It was a symbol of their union. In a place of honor within the new city, a memorial garden was consecrated. The remains of Alara and the fallen Voyagers were interred next to symbolic markers for the Echoes who had died in the tragic conflict. In death, they were no longer enemies but co-founders in memory. As the planet's true sun rose, casting its first warm rays on the unfinished city, a profound peace settled over them all. It was not the end of a war, but the start of a difficult, beautiful peace. The promise of a home, of a people, had finally been fulfilled, not in the way they had expected, but in a way that was grander, deeper, and infinitely more whole. The story of Kaelen is, in many ways, the story of us. It's a journey of overcoming division, of facing our own mistakes, and of discovering that our greatest enemy is sometimes just a truth we have yet to understand. It's a search for connection in a world that so often tries to pull us apart. If you believe in the power of stories to heal, to connect, and to inspire, like this one, then you have found your home. Our journey here on this channel will continue, exploring new worlds, profound lessons, and true human emotion. To ensure you don't miss a single future adventure, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and ring that little notification bell. When you do, you're not just a viewer. You become a fellow voyager in our community. Thank you for listening, and until the next story, be well.